Getting to the matter at hand here, nuclear energy. I'm going to take just a brief moment to run down what's going on in Japan in case people, I know you know what's going on, but in case you want any more details on that, we can talk about that quickly. So what happened was we had the earthquake followed by tsunami. These reactors actually survived the earthquake. It was the tsunami that took out the power that led to all of the problems we're having now. The problems were essentially that they couldn't pump water into the reactors. This caused heating. They had to release pressure from the reactor vessels. This then led to hydrogen explosions that led to other problems that we're dealing with. So everything we're seeing now is a function of not being able to feed that water through the reactor in an efficient sort of way. One of the unexpected problems that occurred is with the spent fuel cooling pools. The explosions that occurred actually impacted those, and we think that's where the water release happened. And then those spent fuel pools came down below the actual level of the spent fuel, releasing additional radioactivity and radiation into the atmosphere, making it that much more difficult of a situation to deal with. Throughout the process, we've heard information about breaches of containment, which is a big deal. It's never happened before in commercial nuclear power. The earlier instances or the earlier reports of this, they think were not the case. Last night there was an additional report of a breach in reactor number 3, which is significant because they think it could be a breach of the actual vessel. And this is a MOX reactor, which has plutonium in it, which complicates things a little bit. But again, they don't know if that's what it was or not. It could have been pipes leaking. It could have been any number of things. So that's sort of where things are. Things in the reactors have largely been stabilized, and they're really dealing with these spent fuel pools now, and now they have the potential breach of containment at reactor number 3. Be happy to go into any details about the specifics of those reactors, how they, do we have those in this country, how have we responded to these sorts of things here. So with that said, I'll go into a little bit now how this may or may not impact nuclear power in the United States. First, a couple of facts. We have 104 nuclear power reactors in the United States today. They provide about 20% of our electricity. They provide for about 73% of our emissions-free electricity. For those of us who are concerned about that, it's domestic electricity. It's secure electricity. It's affordable electricity. It's the least expensive form of electricity that we have in this country. That's not to say that future reactors will be as inexpensive as the current ones, but simply a statement of the fact of where things are today. It's these characteristics that really gave rise to the desire to maybe build new reactors in this country, which we have not permitted a new reactor since the mid-70s. In fact, some recent research that I've been doing uncovered the fact that our current Nuclear Regulatory Commission has never overseen a complete reactor permit from beginning to end. All of the permits that it has issued were started under the previous organization, the Atomic Energy Commission. It has taken on new reactor permits but hasn't issued any yet. That's part of the problem. So we started looking at sort of the people started thinking more about nuclear energy in probably the 2004-2005 time frame, recognizing that we need more nuclear power, that more nuclear power could be advantageous to us. But the problem was that government policy has made it extraordinarily difficult to build new nuclear power plants in this country. I would argue that that is a function of two basic things. We have an onerous regulatory environment, and we have a nuclear waste management policy that is dysfunctional. Now, it's interesting to note, I'd like to focus just a moment on the nuclear waste policy angle of it, that if you look at the evolution of nuclear power in the United States, there's always been a lot of government support, government interaction, government intervention, government driving of the nuclear industry. Over time, this interaction with the government has declined in two sectors of the fuel cycle. If you think of nuclear power, it's basically three sectors. You have front end, which is the fuel stuff. You have operations, which is a nuclear power plant producing electricity, and you have spent fuel management. If you look at the evolution of the industry in the United States, you've had privatization of the first two sections. We now do enrichment privately in this country. We do mining privately. We do all these things privately. Operations have been privatized, largely operating without subsidy. Not completely without subsidy, but largely without subsidy. And these two parts of the fuel cycle are those that give us this extraordinary efficiency that we see in our 104 nuclear power plants, this extraordinary low cost that we see in the nuclear power plants. The one place where this isn't the case is in nuclear waste management. That's what the government continues to control, and that's what I would argue is one of the key components of fixing in order to have a successful future in nuclear power. And this is for two basic reasons. The nuclear power operators are largely disconnected from what happens to the waste because the government's in control of it. I would propose to you that one of the keys to having an economically successful, sustainable nuclear industry in this country is to reconnect nuclear power operators or waste producers to the responsibility for managing that waste. And that's important for these reasons. Once you're responsible for that waste financially, then you become more interested in how you achieve that solution. Rather than a government solution, which hasn't worked, you put people who actually know about nuclear technology, who know how to operate nuclear power plants, who know how to deal with nuclear operations, put them in charge of it. That will drive them to come up with a solution. That will create a market incentive to come up with new ways to deal with nuclear waste, and will push us towards having a sustainable solution. It also has the added benefit of driving technology on the front end of the fuel cycle. Because if you're responsible for the nuclear waste, then you're going to be concerned about what kind of characteristics those waste streams have, what defines that. It's the way your fuel is engineered, the way the reactor technologies you use. So if you're responsible for that waste, then you're going to go out into the marketplace and look for who can provide you nuclear power that gives you a waste stream that's easier to manage. This then begins to drive technological evolution on the reactor side and on the fuel side. And the reason I bring this up is because this is really where a lot of the debate's going right now. Is should we build thorium reactors? Should we build small modular reactors? Should we build high temperature gas-cooled reactors? Liquid metal fast reactors? These are all the sorts of things that people are talking about. What our proposal would do is take those sorts of decisions out of the Department of Energy, out of the government, so it's not a matter of who can gain political favor, and put it into the hands of the private sector so that those technologies that bring the most to bear in the marketplace will be those that move forward. I believe that it's this sort of marketplace, this competitive marketplace, that will drive nuclear power, the cost of nuclear power down, allow the best technologies to move forward, and will ensure that we maximize the potential of nuclear energy, which in turn will get us to where I think Frank is very interested in going, which is a secure domestic source of energy that can continue to push American economic growth forward without subjecting us to the whims of not so friendly forces abroad. So ultimately, we're going to have a debate after Japan whether or not nuclear energy has a role to play. And I think that that debate will be relatively short-lived. I think there will be some impact, but I don't think it's going to be a 3 Mile Island type situation. I don't think, I think that there's broad recognition that we have a 50-year history of safety with nuclear power. What's happening in Japan doesn't erase the 50 years of safe operations we have in this country. Once we have that debate, though, then we're going to get into the next part, which is what do we do now? And that's sort of where we were before. And that's where I think it's important that we talk about what do we do not just to build the next 1, 2, 3, or 4 reactors, because that's a lot of what policy focuses on now. Let's give them loan guarantees. Let's do this, that, or the other. And those policies are fine if what you want is near-term action. That will spur investment into the near term. But in order to have a long-term nuclear renaissance, what we need is a nuclear industry that's competitive, is diverse, and is economically sustainable. In order to do that, we need to make reforms on the waste management side and on the regulatory side. And I think with that, I'll leave it there and be happy to answer any questions or do whatever, Frank, you need me to do.
You came abruptly to a close while I had my mouth full, so forgive me.
I can filibuster that for you if you'd like.
I just need about 30 more seconds to clear my mouth.
I can ask a question, Frank, while you do that.
Please.
Jack, can you talk a little bit about the homeland security dimensions of nuclear power? How concerned should anybody be about the vulnerability of a nuclear plant to a terrorist attack?
We should be concerned, without question. But I would suggest, though, that like tsunamis and earthquakes, terrorists and terrorist threats is not something new to those who operate and regulate nuclear power plants. One of the interesting things with the tsunami and earthquake issues is that people haven't really thought about this stuff before. And they kind of think that maybe our operators and our regulators haven't thought about these things before, but they have. That's why our reactors are I would argue, very safe. Regarding terrorists and terrorist threats, we do things in the wake of 9/11. The domes that in the containments we're all becoming very familiar with. Those are the new reactor designs. They're tested at standards to withstand airplane attacks, for example. Past ones have gone through those same sorts of tests and standards. The defense in depth that exists at nuclear power plants are really second to none. I mean, they not only use guns and guards, but also technical means to secure nuclear power plants. In addition to all that, if a power plant were to somehow be compromised from inside job sort of stuff, there are still enough safety mechanisms that I believe they would shut down. It could be not a great situation, but you wouldn't have an explosion or anything of that nature. The other issue that people bring up a lot regarding this is the security of the materials. This is especially true as we get into some of the waste management issues with things like reprocessing. One of the important things to recognize, people often think that the private sector is not adequate to control these sorts of things. And maybe alone it's not, but what the U.S. government has done a very good job of over the years is developing strong relationships with companies and contractors who oversee nuclear operations and are highly regulated and highly professional in managing special nuclear materials like HEU, like plutonium. HEU is not something in commercial nuclear power, but if we get into reprocessing, plutonium could be something that could be a proliferation concern that has to be properly managed.